This is what my meat chicks look like now. They're about 5 weeks old. Ideally, we would have moved them outside by now, except that the temperatures are going to dip back down into the 30s and 40s over the next couple of days, into the next week or so. So I'm going to be stuck cleaning this pen every couple of days. So today is more of a flock and herd health day. The results came back of the fecals from the few animals that I pulled, and apparently we have a coccidia problem, which most of you probably don't know what that is. It's good and bad news. Good news is that my sheep don't have any parasites, so that continues with the positive parasite resistance. But for those of you that don't know what coccidia is, it's basically a microscopic parasite that infects and acts a little bit different within the body. So it gets within a cell, and then it basically starts to wreak havoc on their GI tract. So the treatment for this that I'm going to use is called Corid. There's also some other things. If you've ever bred dogs or had a puppy before, you may have heard of Albon. So that's a different way that it attacks this microscopic parasite. Once you get coccidia, it's pretty much in the soil, and usually the animals that are infected with it are ones that have altered immune systems. So when they have their babies and lamb, just like with people, sometimes you're more susceptible to getting sick if you're pregnant or have just recently had a baby. And it's the same way with sheep and lambs. And obviously with the young lambs, that's also a concern because their immune system isn't great. So it's expelled in their fecal material. So once again, they're on this bedded pack, which provides a lot of bedding and comfort for them, but it also basically is a breeding ground for this thing. So normally we have preventatives that we put in their mineral supplement, which is over there along the wall, which the reason it's medicated is because it has that preventative in it. So normally we can combat this. However, if you have lambs or ewes that are getting run down, they don't necessarily run up to the feed bunk fast enough to get the grain before the rest of them eat it, or they get pushed out of the way. So then it just becomes like this perpetual issue where the animal's not digesting efficiently and they're not as thrifty, so they're a little bit slower and weaker, which was what we noticed in our lambs. Usually a common symptom is diarrhea, and that's one that I've had before. Like, I know that we have coccidia on our farm, but this time I didn't see diarrhea, so I automatically thought that it was just your typical internal parasite. If you look at some of these lambs, like this red one over here, you can see he's a little bit skinnier. Definitely has a coccidia infection, and some of the ewes also have to be treated. So I do have recommended that I treat all of the sheep in here, so we'll see what my motivation level is. And this isn't just a one-day treatment. I have to catch and wrestle all of these things by myself, and in the process I'm also probably going to be trimming their hooves. Again, it depends on motivational level. And then the goats also need an injection of ivermectin because I think they've got something going on there. So that's another parasite prevention. So yeah, time to go wrestle some sheep. So if you've never trimmed sheep hooves before, this is our bottle baby, so I'm not going to find anything surprising when I trim her hooves. If you look really closely, you'll see that they're just a tad bit overgrown. On the adult ewes, it actually like folds over here, and normally we only have to trim them a couple of times a year, usually when they lamb or before they go out to pasture for the summer, and then sometimes in the fall, depending on if we have issues with hoof rot or not. So you start trimming the overgrown part that's folded over on both toes. You want to be careful, just like your cats or dogs or people. If you get too close, they will start to bleed. So she was pretty quick and easy at their level, or as level as you can get them. So just a little bit more. Sometimes you can cut the tips. The older ewes, you might have to cut the tips to level them out a little bit. As you can see, the cow still thinks that she's a sheep. For anybody that didn't know, she was our bottle baby that lived with the sheep for the first year or year and a half of her life. So they're either best friends or he's protecting his flock from the cow. I'm not really sure which leads me to my next point. While I was trying to catch and take care of the animals, treat the animals that needed to be treated, so the ram in general, their instinct is to protect their flock and to make sure that if anything is in distress, that they are alerted to that and take care of whatever the problem is. So naturally, a few times he was trying to size me up. And those of you that were in my intro to ag class, I did, or I think even one of my 8th grade classes, I did talk about how aggressive intact males can be and what you need to do in order to maintain dominance over them. So if you were to charge at me, you basically just flip them on the ground and leave them there for a little bit, and which is a little bit challenging with a 250 or 300 pound ram. When I explained it earlier, it was a little on the confusing side. So cocci is a little bit different than most internal parasites. So like I said, it kind of infects a cell and then in turn destroys their internal organs, specifically their intestines. So as they are more heavily infected with it, it causes more damage to their intestines. They aren't as efficient in digesting food, and then they end up losing condition. They just overall look off compared to the ones that are thriving. So how Corid works is it actually makes it so that the vitamin B isn't accessible in the digestive system of the sheep, and that is what the cocci really thrive on. So making the vitamin B unavailable, it basically starves the cocci. So if you know anything about sheep or goats, small ruminants tend to have issues if they have a deficiency of vitamin B. So it's called polio. It's not the same as polio in people. It's literally just caused by a vitamin B deficiency. A common way that they get that normally is by overeating grain. So any of my old students at Pioneer or any of my vet science kids, because I did tip, if they eat too much grain, it can cause polio, which basically is like, it ends in paralysis and then eventually they die. Basically their brain swells and they have a sort of meningitis effect if you don't treat them quick enough. So thiamine on hand. If it does happen where they start showing those symptoms, I can quickly give them an IV of thiamine, which is the most efficient way to treat that. It may seem odd that you would use Corid as a treatment for cocci when there are so many health hazards that could happen for sheep. It is off-label for sheep. It actually, it has to be okayed by your veterinarian in order for you to use it. And the idea with it is that you're not killing off all of them. You want your animals to have some level of them. You just don't want an overpopulation of them, because it's the overpopulation that's what causes the issue. So if you use Elbon, which is the other medication I kind of referenced earlier, then you completely kill them off, and it's actually worse for your animals, because then you can end up developing resistant cocci, which is even harder to combat. So if you have them on your farm or on your property, basically, you do want some so that your animals are a little bit, I mean, they're not going to build an immunity, but they have a tolerance to it. So when they are exposed to it, it's not like a shock to the system. And like I said, when animals are, their immune system is brought down by something, whether it's stress, if you just buy animals, if they've just been weaned, which means, if you don't know what weaning means, taking the babies away from the mom. Once it's time for them to be weaned, it's a very stressful time for them. So those are when you should be watching your animals and paying close attention. It didn't occur to me that we would have a problem because our babies are still with their moms and we haven't done anything stressful to them, but because they're on the bedded pack, even today when I was treating them, I went to give one of the lambs the medication. She had poop in her mouth. So, you know, they're animals, and it's not like goats, where goats stereotypically eat everything. Sheep don't normally. They graze. They're not browsers. They don't eat everything in sight. And these are the chickens putting themselves to bed. So once the sun starts setting, as you can see behind me, once it really starts to get dark out, their survival instincts, and they don't want to be an easy meal for predators. So once it starts to get dark out, they go in and they kind of hang out for the night until we close the door. Some people have automatic door openers and closers. We don't have one just because our coop was a hand-me-down coop, so it's not the perfect design. Eventually we'll probably end up building a better chicken coop. Even the guinea hen has enough sense to put himself to bed in the chicken coop.